Well, good afternoon. My name is Phil George, and I'm chair of the Arts Council of Wales. And I've been privileged, along with my whole family, with Kerry and the whole family, privileged and delighted to have the rich friendship of Gareth, Eva, and the whole family for a couple of decades. And like all of you here today, I'm living through some biographical disruption. In as much as in the last year, like you, but not a smidgen as much as the family, I have felt my own life radically disrupted by the loss of my friend. And I am today engaged in the process of narrative reconstruction. In as much as I was saying to Graham earlier that it's really important to take the challenge that he offered us and to honour the man that we're talking about today by moving the thinking and the action forward. Because a number of people in this room may be of a certain age and other people are younger, but whatever the age we're talking about, the future is still to be made. And we need to move this work and this analysis forward and not to give up on it. My own involvements with the extraordinary work of Gareth, Eva, and others in the Merthyr area were in a number of capacities. I was chair of National Theatre Wales, and National Theatre Wales got heavily involved with the development of community action and community creativity and expression in Merthyr. And then later I became chair of the Arts Council, and it was at that time that the extraordinary People's Platform event happened, which was one of the most extraordinary public arts events that we've ever had in Wales, in which some beautifully produced pieces of theatre led by Commonwealth, focused discussion in a room, a pub lounge, a club lounge in Penydarren, full of people at tables arguing issues that came out of their lives. And that day I saw major figures in Welsh life, senior commissioning figures in the government, listening hard to the power of those conversations. It was a real tribute to the process that has been gone through. On another occasion, there were academics in this room, I know. It was a very inspiring occasion. I facilitated a session in which many of the visiting academics to Cardiff, some of you, as I say here today, met the project workers and the residents on the Gareth estate, and met some of the women who had moved through the project there and done things like nursing degrees, and had changed the lives of their community by their own progress. Extraordinary, extraordinary. And all this influenced my own commitment to developing the Art and Health Initiative, which we have in the Arts Council of Wales, where we are funding art and health coordinators in each of the 7 health boards and building partnerships with people like Public Health Wales. So it's been a long history of engagement outside of the academic world for me. Gareth was deeply committed to hearing the stories and the biographies and the insights of lay people, the experts on their own lives, and to harnessing academic knowledge and connections to benefit communities through action and through developing wider understanding of people's lived experiences, developing their wider understanding of their own lived experiences. He was completely authentic about that. He knew what the analytic academic, the contextualizing academic could bring to this party, as long as that person was also a good listener For the next hour, we're going to be hearing about that world of civic engagement from 5 people who worked with him in a variety of ways. You know, in the main, not people I'd like to meet in a dark alley, but there you are. So I'm joined by Ellie Byrne, who is Research Associate in the School of Social Sciences here. Alan Herbert, one from the end there, of the South Riverside Community Development Centre. Martin O'Neill, also of Cardiff University, and a Gurnos boy. Robert Cornwall, who, like Martin, worked in regeneration for many years, running the 3Gs Development Trust, and worked with Martin and the whole team on the Triangle project on the Merthyr Estates. And Chris Roberts at the end there, who has specialised in healthy living and health inequalities in Welsh government. And it was good to be reminded today, wasn't it, of the history of Gareth coming to Wales and the recruitment to Wales in the context of a new polity in Wales and new opportunities for taking initiatives. And it has been interesting to see the very distinctive way in which the Welsh health and social care agenda has developed. And so we think about that. And hello, Mark. Talking about the Welsh government. You're always going to look over your shoulder. Mark is one of the few politicians I'd be happy to turn my back on and feel safe. Let's begin with the work in Merthyr and the Triangle project. And Martin and Robert, first of all, what was your experience of working with Gareth in Merthyr? I mean, how did he approach this bridge building between the academic world and the harsh material deprivation of those communities? How did it go? Talk about first stumbling steps, first initiatives, first sidling up to people in meetings.
From my point of view, I think that the difference we saw with Gareth was before Gareth arrived on the scene with the Triangle.
Can you hear him, by the way? Yes, you don't need a mic? A little bit. Sorry, Robert, I interrupted. There's plenty of mics. There's one down there as well.
Is that better?
No, it's not on, is it?
Oh. Looks like it's on. Yes.
I was sorry to interrupt you. There you are, it's on now.
Is that better?
Yeah, but you can bring it up a bit closer to
Is
you.
that better?
That's wonderful.
I have to lick this.
It's a lip microphone. Bring it up closer. So you were saying, from your point of view, yes.
Before Gareth arrived on the scene, then, to be honest, we saw universities as a nuisance. Because we tended to be treated as what we call the human zoo. People would arrive on the scene, do some research, use us as the Development Trust to identify local people who were happy enough to be interviewed, and they would just carry out the interview, disappear, and that would be the end of it.
Kind of anthropology.
Yes, so people soon got fed up with that, and I'm going to steal one of Martin's lines now, because I think at one time, when Martin mentioned that we were going to have an action research project, which is what Gareth brought to the Gurnos through the Triangle project, someone had him up against the wall and said, we've had a gutful of research, we want things done, not people coming here looking at us, disappearing again. But the big difference with what Gareth did, as far as I'm concerned, is that he created a bridge between what I would see as a sort of real brutal world of deprived communities and the rarefied atmosphere of academic world. Because what he did was sat down with us, he identified how he could go about engaging people to find out exactly what their issues and concerns were. But the key difference was that the whole idea was to identify issues and then do something about it. So we were able to develop all sorts of interesting projects, from identifying what people thought were the problems and doing something about it. And the sort of things that we got involved with then through the Action Research Project was they introduced a cinema club for young children. They introduced the life skills program that you talked about to help people to be able to improve their qualifications and skills. Because again, before the project started, the issue we were up against all the time was the DWP approach to helping people back to work was to put them through some sort of job skills upskilling, but only to meet the jobs that were disappearing anyway. But what we were able to do through the Action Research Project that brought them up to was to identify that people needed to be given what we call an elevator to higher level skills through university, and then that started the whole process going. So I'll stop there for a second.
No, that's really interesting. Martin, I mean, you, as I said earlier, were brought up on one of the estates in question, on girls. So you're a local boy, and they would certainly bend your ears if they thought they were in the hands of some distant visitors who were just seeing them as specimens. So what kind of conversations were you party to?
Well, I was going to say it's quite poignant really for me having this meeting in this room, because I think this was the room when I first had the discussion with Gareth, right at the very beginning of the School of Social Sciences that was being set up in Cardiff. I'd come here as a researcher, working with Hugh Vine who's left now, and I'd come into academia later in life, in my 30s, and I'd done my PhD, become a researcher, you know, was having a trajectory as a researcher, a social science researcher. And I really was hitting a crisis in my journey, if you like, because I really felt that we were just taking out all the time. You know, we were going into communities. I'd just done some work up in Nottinghamshire about the legacy of the miners' strike in Nottinghamshire. Now, many of you can remember the miners' strike in Nottinghamshire, which, you know, I was very heavily influenced, very much involved in the miners' strike. It had ripped whole communities apart. And I was sent up there into this community, and I remember interviewing a guy who just burst into tears because I was bringing everything up again. And I'd come back, we were finishing this sort of project, and I was really having a crisis of conscience about what it was my chosen career now. But why were we doing this? What was the point of doing this? And luckily, you mentioned anthropology. I had read a guy called, quite an obscure anthropologist, called Saul Cax, and he was on about action anthropology and action research. And as I sort of said, I was thinking to myself, this is the sort of stuff I would like to do, this is the stuff I want to get involved in. But I didn't really know anybody who was doing that sort of work. And as I sort of said, we had a meeting here, I think it was to do with the Regeneration Institute, or beginnings of that. And I was aware of Gareth's work, and I suppose, recorded him, and I had a bit of a rant about this. You know. And I'd come back from doing this research, and I was very unhappy. I was thinking of giving up academia completely, maybe going into community development or what have you. And I actually met somebody who was a like soul, if you know what I mean, who could actually understand what I was talking about. And that was the beginning of the conversations. And then I think a few months later, I bumped into him in the corridor upstairs, and he said, have you seen this call from the Welsh Government about some research, wanting us to use action research? And that's right, he told me about the work that Jenny Poppy had been involved in, and up in Manchester way. So that was the beginning of it, and as I sort of said, this wanting to do something more with research, this action research, and actually sort of get involved, and research that could actually engage with communities and actually make a difference.
I remember Gareth telling me, and perhaps this chimes with your experience or will provoke memories in you. I remember him telling me he'd been at a meeting, I think on Gurnos, certainly one of the meetings in the 3Gs, and this person had had a rant at him, it wasn't you, and said, with your academic words and language, and, you know, or whatever, you come in here and you talk at us, and, you know, and Gareth listened, as he always did, respectfully, but he had the guts as well, which he also had, to push back. And he said, actually, I'm only any use to you here if I can bring the kind of ideas that, and connections and arguments that I have a language for. And we're going to have to learn to talk to each other.
Well, yeah.
And there must have been quite tough moments like that.
Well, there were very much tough moments like that, and echoing what Robert sort of said there. You know, I always remember going right back to the the early days of the Triangle Project and Action Research, and it's all very well and good, isn't it, to go into these communities and say, look, we're going to come in, we're going to help you solve these problems and issues like that. And you know, I always remember this particular incident, the one I think you were alluding to, where June Jones, I would mention her, I'm sure, you know, is that she sort of came on in one of these sort of meetings where we were talking about this, and she sort of said, look, Martin, we've had this for years now, you know. And you know, I remember it from when I lived on the estate. We had social scientists crawling all over the estate. People coming up to have a look what poverty looked like.
It was a new extractive industry.
I always say this, it was an extractive industry. The amount of research grants, the amount of PhDs that come out of these communities, it is an extractive. And that money that is going into these research grants and going into these PhDs is not going into the communities. You know, as I sort of said, you know, June said to me, she said, you know, we've had this, and as I said, I can remember from when I was living in this day, that we've had these people coming up here, looking at us, telling us what the problems are, and we're still one of the poorest communities. You know, so all this research, what difference has it made? And I'll never forget this one. When I said to her, look, June, I said, you know me, you know my family, I've grown up on the estate, a lot of my family still live on the estate, right? Well, we're going to come up here, we're going to try and do something a bit different. She said, yes, Martin, she said, I know you, she said, I know your family, that's why I thought better of you.
Well, there we are.
It was like she put a knife in my hand.
But you kept going.
I kept going.
With Gareth Williams' support, and the support of a white team.
Well, this is what I mean, and you know, the whole sort of thing, the point I'm making there, you can't just go into these communities and sort of say, look, we're going to do some things differently. You've got to show them. You've got to develop whole new ways of working. You know, what you were talking about there. You've got to build up these bridges. And then the whole sort of thing, again, I remember, you know, going back right at the very beginning of this, when we were putting the proposal together for the Triangle Project, for the Action Research, and Gareth said to me, oh, well, we'll do some research in the Gurnas. I said, oh, no. And, you know, the reason I was no is because I knew what the feeling was in the area about the antagonism towards research and sort of stuff. And also I knew I would have to go up there and face people I knew. But, you know, as I sort of said, you know, we managed to overcome it in the end, hopefully.
Yes, Robert, you came at this work out of a work and pensions background, out of
what is now the Department of Work and Pensions?
and involvement with benefit.
35 years in the employment service and that sort of background.
What seemed to you to be transformative, potentially, about this project that you got involved with?
I think, first of all, the way that Gareth went about it, because I spoke to Diane, who was the team leader on the Triangle Project before I came down today, and one of the first things that they noticed which was different was that when they advertised the posts for the Triangle Project, they were looking for local people as opposed to people with this or that degree. And that made a big difference because Gareth realised that the way to open the doors to communities is to use local people who know and understand the issues, as opposed to somebody who's well qualified and can understand from an academic point of view. But I think the transformative things were that they, first of all, took the time to sit, not so much to sit down, but to actually go out and find out what the real issues that concern people were. And I'll give you an example. You might think, oh, okay, cinema club, what's that got to do with it? But that, as I understand it, and Martin will confirm because I wasn't in at the very beginning, but the cinema club came about because people were saying, well, there's nothing for children of 5 to 11. So, okay, set up a cinema club, or they set up a cinema club, and that was straightforward. But they used people's attendance at the cinema club then to help to involve parents in child psychology and things like this. So it was using the engagement of people in a very, very meaningful way and in a way that really helped the community to develop.
One last thing before I come to Ellie. We've heard a lot today about the importance of story, narrative and biography. How did this play into this very action-focused scene that you've just been describing? Because you've been talking about the identifying of issues
Right.
and what can be done to
Yeah.
respond to those issues. But did narrative, did biography, did history have some part to play in this conversation?
I would think the only part about history, as far as I could, was a negative aspect, because people were thoroughly fed up of things like this. But where their narrative became useful was that people were beginning to listen to people, and that was a new experience for people, because they'd been done to, as opposed to listened to find out what the issues were. And you know, again, going back to my days in the employment service, we did some research in Newport area, and what we found is that people were what we termed scheme sick. MSc introduced all these different schemes, Job Club, Restart, all these things, where people were simply applied to programs, and then they stood or fell according to whether they could cope with the program.
Yeah.
And again, purely negative aspect. In those days, as far as DWP was concerned, there was a saying was that if you go by the gyros, the hearts and minds will follow. Well, that was the approach of government, as far as we were concerned, is that it was a like sanctions-based regime.
Yeah.
People, this is what was good for people, this is what they need. If they don't comply, they'll be punished. So it was a scheme where people were forced to go through things. Whereas the difference with the actual research approach was people were given the opportunity to identify for themselves what the issues were, and then help to design programs that really helped them to overcome the problems.
Yeah. And listen to each other in new ways.
Yes,
as they did that.
And see, this is what happened with the cinema club, because, okay, perhaps some of those mothers never spoken to one another before, but by bringing the children to the club, they started to get involved. The community development workers were skillful in facilitating this and getting people to work together and support one another. And as far as mental illness is concerned, it was a real boom, because there's a peer support group developed from most of these schemes, where people really help one another to cope with the life and times of living in illness at that point in time. Does that make sense to you?
It does indeed. Well, I promise that this whole session will not be a representation of the People's Front for the Liberation of Merthyr. But it would be a good thing if it were. But we will be widening it beyond Merthyr, if there is life beyond Merthyr. But there is a Merthyr thread that runs through so much work here. And our next voice is Ellie Byrne, who you did a PhD in the Cardiff Institute of...
No,
Oh, you didn't?
No, I did it at UWE in Bristol.
Oh, you did it, you were in Bristol, but you were involved with the institute.
I did it part-time as I was working there.
Oh, I see, right. Now, you've got a strong practice in opening up creative empowerment through arts activity in areas which are stigmatized by negative imagery. I'd like to hear how your work developed with Gareth, because I'm interested in the chemistry of his response to that kind of work, because you were talking about photography, and obviously I've mentioned the theatre work also. So
Yeah.
perhaps you can tell me how that partnership with Gareth and other members of the team started. Here's your
Yeah.
mic.
So I joined the university in 2007 to Kishi, and I didn't actually work with Eva and Gareth for quite a few years, but you know, we had things like reading groups and other centre-wide things that we'd be involved in, and through that Gareth and Eva became aware of what my PhD was about. So my PhD was quite divorced really from the research that I ended up doing at Kishi. I was working on randomised controlled trials, systematic reviews in the field of public health, but my real passion was arts and health, and that's where I'd started as a researcher, and that's where my PhD was in the field of photography as a research method, so looking at alternative forms of knowing, of understanding experiences, and it was it was through conversations about that and about the literature I've been reading that Gareth said to me, "Oh, you're doing something interesting, aren't you, in your PhD?" I was like, "Oh, Gareth Williams is talking to me." And at the time, I was about to go off on maternity leave. I was writing up my PhD, but the Sandpit event that the Arts and Humanities Research Council had set up
Yeah.
for the Connected Communities programme. Gareth and Eva had attended that, and that's where the seed of the idea for the big project that resulted in the People's Platform was formed. So representing communities was that opportunity for, and I was very, very lucky and honoured to be included in, written into that bid before I went off on maternity leave. Because I was feeling a bit like Martin had described. I joined Cardiff University because my contract had finished at UE, and I enjoyed being part of Kishi, but it had gone in a direction that had got further and further away from what my real reason for doing sociology was, and the research that I loved doing. So when I was approached to be involved in this bid, it was amazing, and that project I'll always remember as the best project I've ever had the honour of being part of, and it did allow us, with Gareth's leadership, to develop forms of knowledge that, as far as I could tell, didn't exist before. So we were working with artists, we were working with National Theatre Wales to produce narratives of health, well-being, everyday life that just weren't captured in existing forms of knowledge. So we produced, with communities produced data that was in the form of photography, exhibitions, poetry, music, dance, theatre, monologues. It really struck a chord with people in a different way, and it was because Gareth had supported the development of that in a co-produced way. So we were working with communities, with artists. We weren't privileging academic knowledge or existing knowledge about health and well-being. We really wanted to see how communities wanted to represent their own everyday lives through the arts and humanities. And I think Gareth's own interests in the arts were really pivotal in that. I remember in some of our meetings, some of the meeting notes that he would write would start with a quote from Bruce Springsteen. Yeah. And he would talk about Paul Robeson and literary poets, writers, and he really brought that to the project. And that, combined with his absolute passion for co-production and civic intelligence, just meant that we could develop that project in a really extraordinary way.
What you described there is not just the bold radicalism of Gareth, but his ability to see potential in academic explorations round about him. Earlier today we heard from Kevin Morgan about the ambition in the Regeneration Institute to break down the silos within the university, which I know is really hard as universities get more and more hard pressed and have less and less time for that kind of lateral engagement. But it sounds an incredibly creative process that Gareth and Eva saw things in what you were doing that could be released into the communities that they were working in. That's a very creative process.
Yeah, like I said, it was an incredible project, and I think it was because of Eva and Gareth's leadership of that project that allowed us, because I was one researcher of five in 5 different case study areas, and all of us were very different. So they allowed us to conduct our research, drawing on our own areas of expertise and our own backgrounds, which for me was completely different to all the research I'd done up to that point, where the research process was very, very different. So it was an incredibly creative process, and one that was very challenging as an academic researcher to go in and have different institutional logics from, maybe we were working with schools and with artists, and so whilst I was collecting data, we would have an artist there turning that data into a song and, making up his own bits to put in, and then the teacher would be saying, oh no, we can't have that, we're not having that lyric in that the student had written because, it's talking about things we don't want people to talk about. So it was very creative in that way that we were forced to look outside of our own disciplines and to find a language that we could all work with.
And were there any crunches between this practice, this process, and conventional academic expectations? I mean, you're talking about you're talking about photography as data. You know, I mean, there must be people who thought, "What's that?" You know,
Yeah, and
what
I've
makes it
continued to
data?
come up against crunches in that way. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people who don't think visual data is anything credible whatsoever. And it wasn't that we were saying that traditional forms of data aren't any good at all, but we wanted to show that they were partial and that there are other ways of understanding people's lives. So, for example, with the theatre, I think the people that came to that event, the policymakers, the stakeholders and the communities could then afterwards see what value the arts could bring to research and to data. But yeah, we came up against lots of crunches and lots of, you know, I did lots of questioning, thinking, is what I'm doing research? Is this data? Is it not? Is it? There were lots of points where I thought that.
That's the crunch within the academic system, but within the communities, you've got the arts practice, the creation process, as a form of social empowerment, as transformative action. Did you see lives or processes developing and changing through participation?
Yeah, definitely. We worked with a group of men, working age men, who first became involved through, it was Lee Davis, the community development worker up in the Gurnos, who
Who's up in the exhibition?
Yeah, in the exhibition. I sent a picture of himself to him today. So he started a men's group up in the 3Gs, and the group of men got really into this men's group, and so he asked them if they wanted to be involved in our work at all, and they ended up performing in the People's Platform. So they were involved with us for a long time. They did weekly drama workshops with Commonwealth and National Theatre Wales. They provided lots of data for us as well, and they co-produced that piece of theatre with the team, and then they went on, some of them went on to be in other National Theatre Wales productions. They went on to be involved in other research and action research projects. They've since won awards for adult learning. They're still a group that's moving forward. But I do think that engagement with representing communities through the theatre and drama, I think it did something transformative, just in terms of the confidence and the justification to have a voice and to be genuinely listened to, which I hope is part of the legacy of what Gareth brought to that project.
Thank you very much. Alan, let's come down the TAF. There is actually a very strong Merthyr link, I know, with the work that you do, but we're going to talk about the communities bordering Cardiff Bay.
Cardiff Bay?
Yeah.
The docks.
Yeah. The docks, yeah. You worked with Gareth and his team, mainly in the field of sustainable health and well-being. Tell us how that work developed in the first place in South Riverside.
I'll start in the beginning. Good place to start. The Sharp project, the Triangle project, already had two other partners, one in Estragunlais and Gurnos, and the idea was to get a comparator going between a rural, semi-rural and urban community, and so they were searching out the urban community to work with. Gareth sent out a scout, which was Neil Caldwell, and he smelled, shall I say, a corporate rat. And he approached Cardiff Council, and he was being led in what he felt was a kind of strange way to work in one area of the city, which was Grangetown. And there were certain political reasons why Grangetown was of more favour. Could be because of two cabinet members from the council, or Grangetown councillors, we don't know. But Neil, nonetheless, decided that he would use a bit of his initiative and began to look at what other possible partners were around. And one day he arrived at South Riverside Community Development Store, and we began a conversation. And initially it was the fact that he smelt that rat that got me to work with him. the organisation I worked for, South Riverside Community Development Centre, by that point even was over 20 years old, so they were fairly battle hardened to a lot of these things. They didn't just invite people in, they interviewed them as much as they interviewed you. And we became a partner because we identified a commonality in the way we were working. And a lot of the things as time went by, that immediately led on to meeting with Gareth and getting a greater idea about the type of research. I was particularly personally attracted to the fact that it was a whole new set of working with participatory research, which sat very well and was a good complement to the community development skills we already had in the organisation. So it was this framework that led us to doing it, and additionally the fact that they wanted to create researchers from within the community, and that was another key element. And we developed, as did all of the areas, developed key community researcher that became the kind of front face of the research in the area. So all of that was the stuff that led us into it.
I was talking to earlier about the crunch point. So when you have a community researcher who's working in projects which have a strong university involvement as well as a strong community development base, are there tensions within that concept?
Little. I mean, probably a lot of the, I mean, I'd experienced a lot of the again, echoing what I said before, a lot of very extractive research that had taken place in the area.
Yeah.
The area is one that was and is still one of the areas with the greatest intensity of cultural diversity, so that attracts researchers. Riverside itself is built on a swamp, so there's a lot of health issues there, and that attracts researchers. But the research we'd experienced in the past was very much extractive, people coming in, taking information, going away again. We didn't necessarily present it as anything other than us talking to them, and that's the way we began to work with people and identify the groups of people we work with. Numerous things. There would be one quick example. It was working through local primary school, meeting with members there. Primarily it was Indian, Bangladeshi and Pakistani mothers that we were talking to at this point. One of the things they identified was when we were talking to them about the general things that they would make them feel better in their lives, and one of the key things that came out was swimming, something that they used to do extensively in their homelands but felt they couldn't do here. We began to progress that. There was a women-only swimming place in Mindi Pool at the time, but it was not one that was necessarily easily accommodating the diversity of people we wanted to bring there. It was very much like ladies at lunch go swimming, and we had to negotiate our way into that. And the end result was that we created ways in which the women could use the session. We created through that process the first ethnic minority women's lifeguard in Wales, and we've influenced the way in which Cardiff Council now looks at women swimming. They're all came out of that. You know, it's probably lost in the midst of time where that change came from, but it came out from engaging with the women and having a proper conversation.
Must remember it. I remember Gareth Annie was saying to me when they came from Salford, you know, and Greater Manchester, that they were struck by a different relationship with diversity at that time.
Yeah.
And obviously there was a much more visible world of ethnic diversity and public participation in Manchester than in the Wales that they came back to.
Yeah.
But do you feel that partly through these processes that we've moved on significantly in Wales in that regard?
It's moved somewhat. There's still a lot more to do. But it's certainly become part of the process of empowerment of different communities. You know, they can now look back on that as one of the things that was one of the building blocks towards people being more able to engage with and voice their concerns and voice their desires.
We are sitting in the university and we are surrounded by some the very impressive and powerful academics. What for you, based on the ground, and maybe it's not the important question, maybe the important question is that something was enabled to happen that wasn't dominated and owned by academics, if you like. But what for you was the value and the utility of working with academia? How did their dialogue with academics affect your practice?
Certainly affected the organisational practice that I'm part of. It kind of increased the possibility of engagement with the university itself, and it took it beyond just the university coming in and running a project. The engagement we had through the Triangle project kept going. There have been other times when we've been involved directly with other research projects, more recently quite a lot. But there was a long gap in between when there wasn't a direct involvement, but the connection was made, and the connection, I don't think certainly a year, probably less than a year, would have gone by without myself and Gareth talking to each other about something. And similarly, Martin, who was part of that project, we've had a constant interchange of requests back and forth. Sometimes it might be the university coming to us and saying, can you help us with this? And sometimes it would be us coming to the university and saying, can you help us with this? And it humanized the process.
Thank you. Chris Horace, working on healthy living for a long time now in Welsh Government, and that brought you into contact with Gareth in a variety of ways. I mean, obviously you were involved with the SHARP programme that Alan was involved with, the Sustainable Health Programme, and the development of healthy living centres, and Public Health Wales research, where Gareth had a senior position. So you've worked with a wide range of academics and exemplars. You've worked with Jenny in Salford. What was for you in public policy distinctive about Gareth Williams as an academic collaborator?
Where do I start? I first met Gareth in, I think, 1999, and I went back to the SHARP work just yesterday, actually, so doing my sales pitch now. It was like the Polity Press book which was published after SHARP, and a DVD as well, which the one thing's unusual, Gareth doesn't actually appear in the DVD, which for someone who actually liked to be seen and heard in public. So I can only assume he was busy, or he's delegated to Martin and Deanne. But seriously, I think one thing that was unique about Gareth, I think he was keen to actually let other people who were talking to develop them. And I suspect, having worked closely with Deanne, we've actually seen that as a really important development point for her to speak in public and to gain confidence rather than doing it himself when he could easily have done so, of course. But I think you talk about her, I think the historical context was apt for the time that SHARP came in as a way of introducing sort of Gareth's input, which was we had a change in UK government. We had the work which was just in the tail end of the Welsh Office, which was Better Health, Better Wales, which started to talk about determinants of health, which may not seem particularly innovative now, but going back 20 years ago, that was actually quite a sort of leap of faith, really. And we were also new to the civil service, because I'd come from a sort of national public health body, working in what was then the Welsh Assembly, and we were quite new and naive, I guess, really. And so when we set SHARP up, it was really a blank sheet of paper, but we wanted to avoid funding lots of projects which led little to funding a small number of projects we could genuinely learn from. But at the heart of that was collaboration. And that was really what we thought SHARP was about. It was about links between different sectors and different disciplines. And that's why I think Gareth had a particular part to play. It was his ability to draw in people from the community, to gain their trust, but also, I guess, to gain the trust of those communities with what was in the Welsh Assembly, because there was a sense of sort of distance between, I think, the organisations. And so I think the ability to bring those groups together and to let people articulate their voices in front of politicians, in front of the Chief Medical Officer, for example, was a real skill that he had. And I think that worked in not just the Triangle project, but across the other 6 projects that were recently across parts of Wales as well.
And what about his skills in relating to the apparatus of government, facing the other way?
He was always nice to me, which I suppose counts for a lot. And he was a very clever person, I think, and he realised that it was pointless ranting, as I think someone said earlier on today. He was very measured, but he would also blow, he would deliver that knockout punch when I think it was necessary. But I I think in a very sort of calm and measured way. And I think that's why he probably trusted me to work with him on things like the knowledge spaces work that Jenny Paper was working on as well. The evaluation around the living centres, which we worked on together as well. So I think he would make his point. I think, you know, there are legacies which we'll touch a bit later on that he contributed to. But I think it was just his intellect, his calmness, but also his ability to articulate things through the spoken word, which I think was really, really important. And I remember going to one seminar, and I forget it was even on there, and when it was even, but people had gone along diligently, got their 20 sets of PowerPoint slides and so on. And I think it was 15 minutes each person, and Gareth rocked up. And he put his first slide on, and half an hour later, despite being 15 minutes over time, he got halfway down his first slide, without even referring to anything on the slide itself at all. And that's what impressed me. I think it was his ability to persuade and influence, and just tell you the power of the spoken word. If you had that ability, which I never had, to be honest, but I think Gareth did that really, really well, but put it to very good effect. But he had the intellect behind it to back those words up. And it's easy to sometimes talk at length without saying very much, but I think in Gareth's case, he said a lot very well, and that really made a big difference as well.
It's worth remembering he came from one of the great rhetorical backgrounds. His sister's here today, but his father was a great public speaker and a great preacher and a major broadcaster as well. And you know, so he had that in his DNA. He had that and that deep love of rhetoric in the best sense, not windy, avoidance-based rhetoric, but rhetoric that can really move an argument forward. And I think that was always impressive. Earlier on today, we heard something about that contested front line in relation to public health that Jenny was talking about, and others have talked about earlier, about, you know, it's your fault if you don't live a healthier life. You know what you're going to do. You know, 5 a day, a bit of walking, a bit of cycling, cut out the fags and cut down the booze, and you know, you'll feel better. So you don't need all these things to get through the challenges of daily life. And there must be many people in public health and in government pushing that view. Were there conflicts around that view?
I think that's probably true to an extent, but as I say, I think if you read the Better Health in Wales, it does alert you to the fact that things were changing. I think it's true that there are lots of people who sort of say it surrounds lifestyles and behaviours, but I think, you know, I sort of grew up on the Black Report and Michael White's follow-up report, for example, and Michael Marmot was starting to work around that time as well, way before that really. So I think that recognition was there, but I think Gareth's work sort of cemented that really. And by showing that the projects we fund under Sharp, for example, cover things like women's education, it was young persons' rights in Wales, we had particularly young girls up in Wrexham, and a lot of the work that was done, and I remember, it was an AM whose name escapes me, but she said, it was Rosemary Butler actually, she said, how on earth did you get the funding for these projects through? Because they don't cover health. And I said, but they do though, because public health is so wide, you know, so all-encompassing. Improving education, clearly, looking at things like, you know, social engagement, children's rights, is a really key part of well-being health and public health in totality, really. So I think projects like the Triangle demonstrated that by working on people, on, in a sense, what matters, not just what works, was really, really important to get that recognition that your life, you know, the thing around sort of shit life syndrome as mentioned this morning, is really, really important. And whilst of course we do continue to invest in smoking cessation and tackling obesity and so on, recognising those operating as much wider as the context is really key. And I like to think is now second nature to most policymakers. You know, that's I think one of Gareth's key legacies really is that recognition that we have to look at things in a way. And it seems obvious to say so now, but perhaps it wasn't 2 decades ago.
Well, I sense that major shift in Wales and that recognition that we've got to break down the barriers between our institutions and the people who live lives in our community. And I was at a conference last week in which Mark spoke, and Mark talked about the huge difference between asking people what's the matter with you and asking them what matters to you. And this is the kind of, in insight and distinction that I hope is going to drive our public behaviour as we move forward as a society. I want to end this conversation with all of you, as you feel able and willing, to talk a bit about what you think has been the legacy of working with Gareth and his colleagues. And I do keep saying and his colleagues, because I think the point has been powerfully made today that nobody exists effectively outside of a whole system of support and solidarity and diverse talents. Today we all want to pay tribute to the great partner in every sense, which is Eva. And we heard her speak earlier, and I've heard her speak in all kinds of public meetings, and believe me, as you saw, a force of nature. And Gareth was immensely proud and thrilled whenever he saw you do that. And so it is a network, but this extraordinary man that we're remembering today and celebrating and hoping to move on with has left a legacy. It could be individual on you, it could be in your communities, it could be on public policy. Let's just end in a few minutes talking about that. Martin, his legacy for you, either in the communities you work in or as an individual.
Well, it covers both sides.
It's the same thing almost.
Yeah, it covers both sides, and you know, listening to the conversation, you know, it's brought back a lot of memories for me, to be honest. Is that you know, you talked about his, you know, I always used to have a bit of a tease between me and Gareth, because you know, he was very keen about his Welsh identity, and I used to say, "You're from London, you're not Welsh." Well, you know, I'm really Welsh. I'm from up the
The great William was called, I was brought up Welsh in Golders Green.
Yeah. And I always remember as well, there's no two ways about it. There's not a lot of people I would say this about, particularly my academic career, but Gareth was very much a mentor to me, to be honest. And you know, when I look back, you know, I was a different person having worked with him. And I always remember, you know, I was very, when I first came here, I was very unsure about my public speaking ability and approach. And I'll never forget the first time I saw Gareth do a lecture, and I thought, bloody hell, you know, that guy knows how to do it, like. And then I got talking to him afterwards, and he just slipped it into the conversation that his father used to be a minister. I don't know how that figures. You could just see it in his delivery and all that. They go, Welsh Baptist minister. He had it all there, like, or sort of stuff like that. So, you know, and that, and, you know, I used to, if you like, sit at his feet looking and learning, to be honest. And I hope to think I'm a better public speaker now, having
We're doing all right today.
having had experience. And, you know, one of the things he taught me, and I'll never forget that, one of his favourite things, and you know, I think he could see it, and with me, what was my big problem, I think, was nervousness and all of that. And he used to say to me something like, "Don't worry, blather and bullshit." He said, "You know more than they do, that's the thing." And just taught me to relax and sort of stuff like that. And you know, I just, as I said, I look back on that, and the sort of legacy of that. And you know, this whole sort of thing about, you know, just all these different things. And then another thing I'd like to sort of talk about as well, and it's something that hasn't been mentioned today, and I know his family will know this and appreciate this as well, is that Gareth was very much a spiritual guy. You know, he had a very much a spiritual side as well, which was something that I feel I've got as well, and this was something that we could talk about. You know, we talked about earlier, you talked about cabbages and kings. Gareth was somebody I could talk to the spiritual side of life and feel easy about. For a lot of other people, you start talking about that sort of stuff, they think, what the hell is he going on about now? And all that sort of stuff. But Gareth was somebody you could really much connect with on that sort of area. And then when we talk about the other sort of side of the legacy as well, is it just brought back something that happened just the other day, and I'm just sort of thinking, without everything that had gone on before, this wouldn't have happened. And Alan will know what I'm talking about here. Was I left the School of Social Sciences now. I work in the School of Medicine, and I've been up there this now. And the other day my phone went, and I was in work, and it was one of the guys I used to work with at Riverside, Ham, who now works with the refugees in Cardiff, because there's a lot of refugees, particularly Syrian refugees, coming into the area. And Ham had talked to you. You had told him I was now working in the School of Medicine. Ham had all these doctor refugees and medical refugees that had now come into Cardiff who were interested in trying to get back into medicine. Ham phoned me up, can you help me out, Martin? Yeah, I'm sure I can. So I had a word around with a few of the people in the medical school, and we arranged the sort of sessions where these people could come in and talk about and get guidance about how they can become practitioners in this country now that they're refugees. Now, if there hadn't been that legacy, that just wouldn't have happened in the past. You know, people working in the community they wouldn't have had somebody on the other end of the phone to talk to, and that's just a simple example of how that happens now. And you know, I think Alan talked about this. Even though the Triangle Project came to an end a long time ago, there has been these relationships developed between communities, and not just the community in Cardiff, communities in the valleys. And this is a really good example of communities and universities working together.
Which is the kind of Wales we're trying to build.
Exactly.
In the spirit of the Future Generations Act. Alan, perhaps you could pick up on that, because I've been very touched by, it's there in that exhibition, I've been very touched by these ley lines, these social ley lines, that this mapping of the connectivity between the valleys and the Bay Area or the docks.
Yes.
That's been quite a powerful process.
It has, and I think it's an essential one. And it having the relationship that was built up, that is the real legacy of the work with the university and with Gareth. It is that it's given a rationale to the ways that we work together that goes beyond just we're two organisations that are both struggling. It's we're two organisations that have an awareness that is built over the years, and we share that awareness and we build on that awareness. And that's the real legacy there, is that accentuating awareness of the social need of what you're doing. On an organisational level, the organisation I work with, I'd say the considerations given to health and well-being came directly from the SHARP project. It has infected us as an organisation. It guided the way we delivered Communities First for 11 years. And it meant that we look for the health and well-being aspects of other work we do. When we look at ESOL programs, we know that it's not just about people learning English to get a job, it's people learning English in order to be more able to conduct their lives. We understand that, and that's the thing that came out of that, really.
It's a powerful legacy. Chris, what's been the legacy in terms of the development of a distinctive public health policy in Wales?
I'm probably not best for public health policy, but I think one thing that did came from Gareth's work was not just the importance of partnership, but the complexity and difficulty of working in partnership sometimes, and the recognition that it really takes a lot of hard work to actually get there. I think we often see partnerships being the way of working, and it's obviously envisaged in the Future Generations Act in this country, but that's really difficult to do. And I think when we started SHARP off, we made a point of stepping back and saying if problems were experienced, we're not going to come in and just sort of intervene, because we're never going to sustain projects if you sort of come asking for advice immediately. I remember one early conversation with Gareth when there was a sort of a problem within the partnership in the early days, and we said, well, you know, you've got to sort that for yourself, essentially. And it worked through, and I think that project was a great success. But I think that recognition that partnership building is difficult is actually really important for public policy, because it is so important to public policy, but it shouldn't be a given because it clearly is a real challenge.
It is hard work. Robert, we're coming to an end, so briefly from you and Nelly, but the change in your life from working with this remarkable man.
Personally,
Yeah, well, whichever way you like.
from a community development point of view or community generation point of view, I think the biggest change was that I mentioned earlier on about how we didn't value research, but what the Triangle Project taught us was how to value research and to be able to produce evidence-based information to act upon. And I think that was a huge transformation.
As a tool of empowerment.
As a tool of empowerment. And can I just say one more thing then? Before I came along, I asked Jan, who was the team leader of the Triangle Project, why was Gareth accepted by the community then? And this is what she said. The women found him attractive to look at.
There we go, leave it there.
Well, so did the men, as we heard from Neil earlier.
That was in complete contrast to when we were working with the Working Links. Their manager used to refer to the wild women and girls. So, you know, Gareth was, he was genuine, he could relate to local people, very knowledgeable, but able to impart his knowledge respectfully. I think that was a massive thing for local people. Non-condescending, non-judgmental, and above all, trusted and made people proud to be part of his project.
That's a great testimonial, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we'll settle for that. And Ellie, a last word for you. How you think about legacy and working with Gareth Williams?
Well, if it hadn't have been from working with Gareth, then none of the work that I do now would be happening at all. So
Tell us what you're doing now. Right?
we are, well, with Eva until she left last year and abandoned me. I now lead a research network in cultural participation, and it is come really directly from the legacy that Gareth left in terms of previous projects, a network of academics, artists, arts organisations, community organisations, cultural institutions. We meet regularly to develop a research programme. It's resulted in funded projects and lots of collaborations and shared working and thinking about different forms of knowledge, theatre of knowledge exchange, that's one of the funded projects. The Anchor People's work has come directly from the legacy of Gareth's work. And in terms of his impact on me as a researcher, he made me understand the importance of compassion and conducting your research in a compassionate way, and being tolerant and accepting and patient. And so he completely influenced every piece of research that I've done.
Wow. Compassionate research. Might be worth ending with that pair of words, which I'm not sure are very often yoked together. But in the life of Gareth Williams, they certainly were. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation for this.
It's been a long day. It's been an emotional day. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. It's been very convivial, and that's how Gareth would have liked it. But this is really me saying thank you to lots of people. You know, thank you so much to all the people who have contributed. Thank you to Jenny, to John and Graham for working together, making this possible. We got funding to actually put this event on. It's been a joy to work through, you know, what we would do and how we would do it. And it's tremendous that so many people agreed to come along and to share their memories. And I hope you've had lots of conversations in the spaces between. Thank you to Glenn as well. I mean, the arts installation, I'm sure you would agree, is absolutely phenomenal. And I think it showed in a different way, you know, not just through presentations or talk, but just, you know, the brilliance of the artwork. And you can really see that it spoke, well, literally, actually. But, you know, said things in a different way. And I think Gareth really felt that you know, producing different ways of seeing, understanding and knowing was really important in a way that kind of affects people's emotions too. And emotionality is a form of understanding and knowledge. Gosh, who do I say? No, well, thank you to John. Now I get to go to some of the rugby internationals now. So, to, you know, be Gareth really at the Wales matches.
No, you're yourself.
So yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I'd like to say too, thank you to Or the people that, you know, Gareth, it's been said that Gareth, you know, appreciated everyone he worked with. We've talked a lot about his academic work, his work in communities as well, but the support he has had from so many people working in administrative roles has been tremendous, and he felt that work, he couldn't have done that work without, have to say, a battalion of women all the way through. We've talked about the kind of the lovely memories that people wrote to Gareth. Just when we thought he was just about to die, actually, Jenny wrote
The second time.
it was the second time we thought he was going to die, and he kept coming back to life, which was great every time. Hello again. But it was great because lots of people wrote letters, and I was able to read them all out to him, and he particularly liked the bits where they talked about his good looks and his twinkling blue eyes. And one thing about Gareth, I had to say, he was vain. So whenever I came to those bits, there was a sort of smirk on his face. But I have to add another letter, because it did go out to the medical sociology community. But one of his first administrative assistant, Leslie Jordan, found out that, you know, people were sort of sending their memories, and it's been included here. And I'll just read part of it, because she says, I too have a wee story about the beautiful Gareth. I did read that to him. I had previously worked in the NHS as a secretary in the estates department. One of my main duties was to brew up for the men. Well, I couldn't believe it when I was met on my first day by a man wearing skimpy shorts and flip-flops, asking if I would like a cup of coffee. What a revelation and an eye-opener to work with, not for, a different, interesting and open-minded person. And she says, it was an absolute joy working with you. And I would like, what's it say? Hold on. And I must add to that, one of my secretarial duties was to be sent to buy out your chewing gum. All right, okay. Political correctness out of the window. But I must say that this today couldn't have been brought together in the way that it was without huge support from Mel Evans here and Deborah Watkins, who also worked with Gareth. And with Deb for many, many years, wasn't it? He used to come and pop in, have little chats with you. You have the same birthday, don't you? So, little presents every 2nd of August. And Mel has done a phenomenal job. She too has worked when we were in Kishu became Kishu, and supported us magnificently in actually what is, doing administrative work when you're working, doing co-production with community organisations and artists is actually really complicated from an administrative point of view. But Mel did it beautifully and expertly, and it's because of her that you've seen those beautiful posters that come down the walls, and little touches. I think, flowers. I think we've got tissues around. Thank you. That's your idea. But the two of them have been fantastic, and he would have wanted me to say thank you to you, so I'd just like to give you a present. I'm not expecting you to say anything, so don't worry. I haven't done what I was supposed to do, because Jenny suggested when I was doing this that I should have that poster, the fickle finger of fate picture, which has been shown quite a few times today, because I think, I don't know, it just sort of brings Gareth alive. He feels alive in that picture too. As you saw a bit of the film that he did when he was funded by the British Academy to participate in this conference about well-being. He had a husky voice because he'd had treatment, and he spoke very softly, but it made people listen to him even more. And he related his talk on well-being, talking about his own well-being. And I think Lee Monaghan had on the slide about the structures, the social structures of support. that held him up, and that was very true. And when he came out from his coma in 2017, it was magnificent. He came out, but he felt afterwards, and he was amazed at the kind of support that he'd had from everybody. But he described it then, and he used a more biblical reference actually. He felt that he was surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. And I think that's what he felt about all you, about everybody he knew, that he felt that he was supported and loved. So thank you all as well. But I'd like to finish with a photo montage of Gareth's life. And it does actually end with a cloud. And the cloud is on your programme too. And that was taken by Katrin. And she'd been listening to The Lion King going home. I think it was, were you going back to uni? Yes. And she looked up and she was listening just to that bit. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Mufasa, the lion cub's father, appears as a cloud to the cub. And she saw that cloud just at the same time. So she couldn't believe it. And we end, I think, on that cloud. And Alan here, we've all contributed in some way, did a beautiful recording and composed it and played it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Committee Room 1, where you've seen the arts installation. There's some wine. Sian, my daughter, oldest daughter, is going to propose a toast to him. So if you could grab yourself a glass of wine, and we'll wait. Sian's just going to say something. Drink, happy, say your goodbyes to people, and that will be the end of today. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.